to go back to your question about inside Iraq, and I think they both described a lot of the situation to a certain extent, but also it comes down to a couple of things. One, the fundamental lack of freedom of movement. So, you live in the neighborhood, I'll choose my neighborhood, Ixelles, okay? You can't leave Ixelles because you're all Sunni living in Ixelles, and that's where you have to do everything. Maybe there's a hospital, maybe there isn't. So one of the fundamental causes of the displacement or the lack of access to services, not having potable water, not being able to go to school, not being able to reach the clinic or the hospitals is because fundamentally the majority of the population throughout Iraq does not have fundamental freedom of movement. They cannot go from Brussels to Antwerp. They cannot go from Baghdad to Kirkuk easily.
Shannon, let me just say one thing. I think most of the people don't know that the majority of the neighborhoods are walled in. They build walls.
Well, in Baghdad.
Yeah, in Baghdad.
In Baghdad. Yes, they're gated, walled, 12-foot, okay, 3.5 meter high blast walls, anti-bombing blast walls. It's basically several mini Berlins, if you will, to put it into a European context. So that's just Baghdad, though, just to make sure that that's very Baghdad specific. But I'm actually talking all of Iraq. It's very difficult. People live in very tiny, confined space due to the fundamental fear of being executed, kidnapped, blown up in the wrong place at the wrong time. So that fear of constantly living toward the threat of violence. Because I would agree, statistically, there is, quote, less bombing, shootings, et cetera, in the last year. But that does not mean that statistically the threat of violence has decreased. I don't believe that it has. People still live very much in fear in the same way they did in 04, 05, 06, 07, 08. Despite statistically some of it is decreased, the overall effect is not yet felt or seen or experienced by the individual Iraqis and families. And I think that is what is missing, because, you know, all parliamentarians in every political arena I've been in, when I speak about refugees, oh, we didn't know. It's like, well, no. They do know, or they could know if they wanted to know. I think the fundamental problem towards situations like Iraq, like Palestine, like Congo, Darfur, let's just name them, Burma, you know, Afghanistan, Pakistan. The long list of conflict areas is the lack of fundamental political will to take care of the basic fundamental needs and rights of a population. And the lack of political will upon the international community to abide by the fundamental international conventions that they have signed. So I strongly disagree with his, I didn't know. I run into that all the time. So back to inside Iraq, I had to make that comment. So secondly, I would like to address the situation of women, because there are many reports, and I think they underestimate the situation. The United Nations did a report that documents 21,000 women in the last 5 years have reported sexual assault, rape, extreme violence. I'm sure, as you know, because unfortunately around the world, the rate of reporting on sexual violence is extremely low. It's grossly underestimated. But again, I'm going to go back to the analogy of these people are trapped. So it's also, they're trapped, and a lot of people don't know what they are experiencing because we can't reach them. Either the international community or really the Iraqi government doesn't choose to outreach to its population. They have described very much, I would agree with them, there's very much a focus on the macro level of development, but nothing is penetrating the basic fundamental needs of the population yet. And yet, I would agree, billions of euros, dollars, whichever currency you prefer to talk about, has been invested. But it's very difficult to see it has not impacted or improved the daily life of an Iraqi. So humanitarian organizations are inside Iraq for that reason. We are there to have an impact to try to improve the daily life. And there are international organizations like the IRC, and there are national Iraqi NGOs, humanitarian NGOs, that work very hard at trying to reach that grandmother with her granddaughter in a neighborhood that's afraid to leave her house, and to make sure that they have food, water, you know, their shelter house isn't falling apart on them, et cetera, et cetera. But I must say the rate of violence against women and girls is escalating, and it will unfortunately probably continue to escalate. But the inside Iraq does mirror many conflicts where women and children bear the brunt of the discrimination, of the isolation, and of the vulnerability. And that's why little girls are not going to school. It's because, I will go back to, they cannot move from point A to point B due to the fundamental fear.